Pax et bonum. May the living God's peace and goodness reign on you today. Hello from Boiseland. Boise, the capital of Idaho, and the little city where, when visitors tour, they always ask, "Hey, where are all your homeless people?" Yeah, it's true. We don't have much of a homeless problem here. For one thing, we have a simply amazing they're interdenominational, interdenominational homeless shelter here, and they care well for probably 80% of the homeless in the valley. For another thing, the green ganja is not legal in Idaho, so it's no fun to be homeless here if you can't get a government check and then immediately spend it on drugs. And then still for another thing, our winters are biting cold, so living in a tent in the city for 3 to 4 months is just not tentable.
Oh, that's fun. I see what you did there.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, little wordplay for you. And praise God, Boise, even though it does vote progressive by a 53 to 47% margin, and that margin is narrowing as more and more people move in from out of state, and they're moving in to be more conservative. They're trying to get away from blue states. Even more, Boise does not spend hundreds of millions, let alone the billions of dollars that states like California spend, only to exacerbate the problem. And here, moving from Boiseland to national concerns, I want to think with you today about our nation. Watergate? Turns out Watergate was just a squirt gun. Let me explain. Then President Richard Nixon, who later resigned, he instructed men clear back in 1972 to break into and burgle the Watergate Hotel. They went in to steal documents and wiretap some phones. That was in Washington, D.C., where the Democratic National Headquarters were then seated. Nixon later resigned a year and a half later in 1974 when Congress found out and began the process of impeachment. And owing to that scandal, Richard Nixon is widely remembered today as Tricky Dick. And yet, Watergate? Just a squirt gun. Please allow me to explain. Oh, Lordy. In December of 2016, right after Donald Trump had won the election, and right before he was to be sworn in as America's new president, still sitting then President Barack Obama met secretly. This was on December 9th, 2016. He met secretly with John Brennan, the CIA director, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Loretta Lynch, she was then Attorney General, John Kerry, and James Clapper. He was the National Intelligence Director, and together they agreed to promote the story that Trump had been helped by Russia to win the 2016 election. If you know the phrase Russian dossier, or if you remember back 8.5 years to all that, you'll remember that story, Trump being a Russian spy, or Trump being aided and abetted by Vladimir Putin, or Trump having been willing to do favors for Russia, sell his soul to Putin, in turn for getting election assistance from Russia, you'll at least remember the national media swirl. Well, again, this cabal of progressives who met on December 9th, they were rabid in their attempts to stain and embarrass and derail the Trump presidency with news about Trump and Russia. Well, folks, you've undoubtedly heard, but I think worth noting that in the words of Tulsi Gabbard, she's now the director of the National Intelligence Agency, she said, quote, "There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in order to help President Trump win, and selling that contrived narrative to the American people as though it were true." Gabbard said, "It wasn't." That report that we released today shows in great detail how they carried this out. They manufactured findings from shoddy sources. They suppressed evidence and credible intelligence from other high-level intelligence agencies inside the federal government that disproved their false claims. They disobeyed traditional tradecraft intelligence community standards and withheld the truth from the American people. In doing so, they conspired to subvert the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that election in November of 2016. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump and launching what would be a years-long coup against him and his administration. We're here today, Gabbard said, because the American people deserve the truth, they deserve accountability, and they deserve justice. Close quote. She continued by saying that other documents and studies and reports confirm the same, that, quote, there was a gross politicization and manipulation of intelligence by the Obama administration intended to delegitimize President Trump even before he was inaugurated, end quote. Again, Tulsi Gabbard said that this false narrative, Trump's Russia collusion, was all ordered by none other than President Obama himself, and it was to be released in January of 2017. She has the documents. She has the official signed and government stamped documents that verify all this. It's not any longer a conspiracy to speak thus. As it turns out, Russian leader Vladimir Putin was not rooting for Trump to win. He believed, like most of us here in the USA, that Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidential election. I remember pulling into the grocery store on the night of that election thinking, okay, let's go home and let's get some snacks. Let's go home and brace to watch Hillary be coronated. But Vladimir Putin, he was doing things to cause friction and tension inside the USA. Yeah, he was doing that. But he was not in favor of Trump winning. Even more, Putin had even held back on leaking quite embarrassing information about Hillary Clinton, that she was taking medications. Turns out they were tranquilizers to fight against her own psycho-emotional issues, and that she was having secret meetings with American religious leaders, offering them State Department goodies if they'd support her presidential candidacy. This was all going on. And guess what? John Brennan, then he was CIA director, he knew that Vlad Putin had that smoking gun info on Hillary Clinton. Brennan knew then that Putin wasn't going to release it until after Hillary became president. But still more, the infamous Russian dossier, also known as the Steele dossier, a document ginned up by Christopher Steele. He was then working for Britain's own MI6 intelligence organization. That dossier became to be known as Crossfire Hurricane. Tulsi Gabbard explained that dossier was entirely fabricated. It was a 35-page document that was, as has been talked about for over 8 years now on Insiders, it was a hoax. It was altogether a hoax. The dossier, which was originally paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, if you can even believe something like that was happening. The dossier had zero credible intelligence information, and worser still, there were other high-ranking intelligence officials who knew and challenged that all of this Russia narrative was not obtained through normal protocols, that did not in fact affirm the Trump-Russia narrative, which Obama, Brennan, Clapper, and the rest of the Star Chamber were repeating. And still, John Brennan, as CIA director, especially pushed the narrative forward to media outlets. And Tulsi Gabbard and the Office of National Intelligence now has all this documented. Gabbard put it succinctly: John Brennan lied. Even though John Brennan knew the dossier was a fabrication, he directed other CIA officials to use it to discredit and delegitimize Trump. She said, quote, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, and others, she reiterated, including their mouthpieces in the media, knowingly lied as they repeated the contrived narrative, end quote. But the real shocker that Gabbard released on Wednesday, July 23rd, is that this was all of it directed by then President Barack Obama. And that means Richard Nixon's Watergate conspiracy was merely a squirt gun of a scandal. Russiagate was a highest level ongoing coup. That President Obama, again based upon Tulsi Gabbard's live TV recorded briefing last week, I watched it in the afternoon, it happened there in the Whitehouse Press Corps room, that President Obama directed all this, solicited the assistance and cooperation? Was it a conspiracy? I don't know. That he directed and solicited the assistance and cooperation of the CIA and the NIH and the director of the FBI, James Comey, it's the stuff of movies. A movie maker's fantasy come true. And why do I say that? Because we have, on multiple recorded television and other interviews, each of those high-ranking officials denying that there was any wrongdoing. All of them on tape denying, you can go watch, they were doing it in scoffing, mocking fashion, that there was any malfeasance whatsoever in pressing the Trump-Russia narrative. They were denying that on camera. They were government officials defending their actions as governmental officials. Again, if it's true, they all agreed to go forward with the contrived narrative, and then later lied under oath on camera. And more amazing still, some of them lied inside of congressional interviews. They looked into the eyes of the Congress and lied to their faces about the concocted nature of a narrative designed to derail their political opponent, Donald Trump. What's my point? This is the biggest scandal in American history. This is the biggest scandal in American history. Watergate, that was a squirt gun of a pea. Barack Obama derailing Trump's presidency with an entirely fabricated lying narrative, that is a nuclear water cannon. So, as it turns out, there was no peaceful transfer of power clear back in 2017, the year Trump first entered the White House. Why? Because the intelligence agency, or at least top-tier intelligence officials, they were aligned and conducting a public relations battle against Trump, and they did that for most of his first 4 years. Oh, man. And you got to get this, my listener. I don't want you to miss the irony in this. The Democrats, for at least 4.5 years, have been telling us that because of the January 6, 2021 coup attempt, I don't know, they say, was it a revolution? An armed assault on the Capitol? Was it a domestic invasion? They say that there was no peaceful transfer of power when Joe Biden took the White House. Like I say, this is all the stuff of Hollywood. My listener, you ought to put on your cardboard 3D glasses while you're listening to me today. This is that crazy. But truth is, as Tulsi Gabbard just explained it in her White House briefing back on July 23rd on Wednesday, Barack Obama, John Brennan, James Clapper, Susan Rice, Loretta Lynch, and others were strategically involved in hampering the transference of power to Donald Trump. Should we call it a conspiracy? I don't know. Should we call it a soft coup? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you, my dear listener. I'm going to leave that up to history. But it was an effort, as Tulsi Gabbard narrated, to hinder the democratic process. It was an effort to hinder the will of the people through a properly conducted election process. It was also, as we're learning, an effort to hinder the peaceful transference of power. For the entirety of his first 4 years, and honestly, for all of the 4 years between his two presidencies, the FBI and others harassed, legally pestered, Florida home raided, indicted, and tried to prosecute Donald Trump. It was a direct assault on the peaceful transference of power. And like I say, this all makes Watergate look like a squirt gun of a scandal. Watergate was a pimple pop. Russiagate is a volcano explosion. Now, of course, those involved, for instance, James Clapper, former director of National Intelligence, they're writing this off. They're framing this as either a super tired, well-cooked, oh, it's so overdone because it's already been scrutinized for 8 years or more kind of event. Or this will be written off by the progressives as an ad hominem, to the man, personal attack. What else would you expect from a fascist like Trump kind of manner? Or still more, the way they're playing it, the major media are dismissing all this as a still another lying right-wing conspiracy theory. And you know this, my listener, because you lived through it. You had friends and relatives who denounced Trump on the basis of this fabricated narrative. Like me, you had family members view you as an ugly racist pariah because of a totally concocted narrative about how Trump was elected the first time. Russia, Russia, because you voted for Trump. Or because you spoke favorably about Trump. Oh, this narrative was used to divide friendships and families and even local church communities. This fabricated corporate lie cost people their jobs. Other people couldn't get a job when they were interviewed because they might have said something favorable about Trump or Russia, and so they didn't get the job. And all of it is just an ugly, historically, epically ugly lie. Now, here's an angle I've heard no one mention: Ukraine. Tens of millions of people in the West, so I'm thinking about Europe too. Tens of millions of people in the West, because of this bone marrow deep hatred of Donald Trump and those, 80 million people who voted for Trump, right-wing fascists. What percentage of the West now hates Russia with a vehemence unprecedented? They hate Russia to a significant extent because Obama and Brennan and every major media outlet in the West said Russia stole the 2016 election. And hear me clearly, I'm not taking Russia's side in the Ukraine war. Oh, please, Lord, end that unspeakable war. I'm for Ukraine. I've been there twice for 3 weeks. I love Ukraine. But the brainwashing, the defraudation of an entire 360 million population nation, a steady and unceasing drumbeat of a lying narrative, has shaped how millions of people view Russia. It's that far-reaching. It's demonically ugly. Like I keep saying, this is the stuff of blockbuster Hollywood movies. Holy moly. So what happened? We were played. We were played by the power-wielding media. Oh, for the umpteenth time. But worse, we were played by officials at the highest levels of government: CIA, NIH, FBI, Attorney General, and Schneikes, the president, gulp, the president of the country. And that, gulp, is how horrid and wicked this all was. A nation shredded by a lie. It was psyops of the highest kind, a lying narrative generated by the CIA, FBI, and the President of the United States. It's truly outrageous. Oh, and the damage this does to the national psyche is immense, right? It creates suspicion. It creates distrust of the government, the likes of which will take generations on end to heal. If you think Watergate shredded the way people view the power of government, wait till 30 years from now and Russiagate, what it's going to do and what it's done to the nation. Oh my, it's going to take generations to heal. The wound was great. Our nation was infected with a kind of psychological leprosy. Millions of brains are effectively oozing out of people's heads. Healing must take place. Trust has to be restored. Matt Taibbi, formerly of the Rolling Stone magazine, said if we don't fix this one, the republic is over. This can't go on without fixing or healing or restoration. And so, now what? Well, don't expect anything by way of truth-seeking or serious reporting from the legacy media. I mean, queso sagrado. They were deliriously, happily culpable for pushing the false Russian dossier narrative from the moment John Brennan released it to them. They relished in the trashing of Trump. They got excitable butterflies in their stomach each and every time they could run that false anti-Trumpian narrative up the flagpole. And since Tulsi Gabbard's Whitehouse presser last week, major media has hardly covered this story at all. So today, the honest truth is, I'm just giving you a fingernail scratch of what really went on. I'm giving you a fingernail scratch of how the faux Russian dossier was used as part of a much larger effort to delegitimize Trump, to smear Trump, to put Trump's allies in jail, to put them in the poorhouse, I mean several of them were bankrupted, and to shut you and me the blankety blank up, to put us in the closet and make us shut up. Like I say, there's so much more. I wonder, oh my, oh me, will the DOJ go after John Brennan? Has the statute of limitations run out? Will they indict him? I don't know. Will the DOJ go after James Clapper, indict him? I don't know. Will they go after Susan Rice, indict her? I don't know. Was this a conspiracy? I don't know. I don't legally know how one goes about prosecuting a conspiracy, but me? I think where conservatives are right now, having been put in prison for attending pro-life rallies, completely exhausted by the COVID nightmare, by the vax hysteria, exhausted by being told that they're hateful Christian nationalists by the media, former friends, even our extended family. I think the nation is so frazzled that if some of these folks aren't in fact indicted, there will be still further massive electoral blowback, if that's the only blowback that occurs. I don't believe the nation will give Trump or Attorney General Pam Bondi a pass for doing nothing with regard to this scandal. I don't think non-action at this point, at this frazzled time in history, is going to suffice. If there isn't a serious attempt to indict high-ranking folks, followed by extensive prison sentences, so that this won't happen again within the next 100 years, things are going to get red hot on the national scene. What do you think, my listener? What are your reflections on all this? Me at uncensoredunprofessor@gmail.com. And then I wonder, oh man, will Barack Obama be indicted? I don't know. Probably not. It's highly unlikely. Personally, I think if they did indict Obama, there could be massive civil violence. Violence, if not worse. I mean, if the summer of George is any indication, can you imagine Barack Obama being indicted? I can't. And frankly, if I was President Trump, I would make a big deal out of pardoning Barack Obama. It would be a way to pour hot ashes on his head. Right? Here's Trump. President Obama, We're embarrassed that you would do something so vile and so petty to the nation. But you know what? For the sake of national peace, I'm going to pardon you. You are forgiven. Oh, wow. Can you, my listener, can you imagine such a scene? It's so cray-cray. That would be epic. But there's more coming down the tracks on all this. More horrific details are going to be made public. And so, pray for our nation. Pray for justice. Pray for an awakening.
You mean an awakening?
No, an awakening. The kind breathed of God's Spirit that causes a national redirect. But, wow, that's the news bomb that's probably being covered by no news agency in your region. Yeah, that's the big news. And then, just what should Christians think about politics? We'll get to assessing that through a Christian worldview in just a moment. There are the professional ways to do things, and then there are the makeshift ways of doing things. Honey, would you run and get me the duct tape? And the makeshift ways in the end cost more money. They take more time later. So, do it right the first time. When it comes to your SoCal roofing problems, call Gallerini Roofing at 714-244-6567. They do residential and commercial roofing jobs. They're bonded, licensed, insured. They have decades worth of experience. Gallerini knows how to do the job with excellence and professionalism. So give him a ring at 714-244-6567 and get the job done right. Gallerini Roofing, a proud sponsor of the Uncensored Unprofessor. Those recent White House, highest level CIA, FBI involved revelations go, for me, to the question of a Christian's public bearing. What's it mean to be a Christian in the world here in 2025? What should be the posture of a Christ follower with regard to politics? Should Christians be involved in politics? Should Christians care? Or here's a related one. Should Christian parents teach their kids about politics? Oh man, for the sake of the planet, I sure hope so. If you, mom and dad, if you don't teach your kids what to think and how to think about politics, they will take their cues from godless culture. That is the trend right now, pure and simple. And so Christians are approaching and thinking about politics like rank pagans. But the truth is, there are different historic positions among Christians. There's a variety among believers on the matter. And be advised, my good and thoughtful listener, each of these positions is rooted in biblical interpretation. It's really not fair or true to say this position is biblical or that one isn't. They all take cues of one sort or another from stories or passages, themes even in the Bible. The real issue is that almost no one axes or examines in their heart is, why do you prioritize the biblical passage that you do? Why is that section more authoritative and informative regarding Christians and politics than the other section? Almost no one can articulate those deets. It's just too hard to do that sort of internal self-diagnosis. But I want to give you some of the arguments in summary form. I mean, this is a podcast, not a 3-hour night lecture in a class. I want to give you a summary of these positions. And first, I want to work through some no positions. No, Christians shouldn't be engaged. They'll be variously argued and defended. Again, these folks say, no, Christians should not be engaged in or even attentive to politics. It's a waste of time. And this one gets unpacked through a couple traditional lenses. First, it's argued often that Jesus himself was apolitical. This line of reasoning asserts that Jesus didn't teach or say or assert anything about his disciples being involved in politics, about them being politically engaged, so neither should we. Or more, here on this Jesus-y angle, they will argue Jesus positively modeled a pacifistic approach to all power. Jesus was not only indifferent about the public use of power, he stood against the public use of power. That includes coercion, police force, the judicial branch, the military, and politics. Jesus, they argue, was apathetic regarding power. Jesus refused to use power, they say, and so the position should just be one of apathy. And so, like Jesus, we should be disengaged and politically apathetic. More broadly, there's a second perspective that goes to the no answer, and this one goes like this. Because politics is evil, Christians should stay out of it. It's an even more binary perspective than those who argue from their interpretation of Jesus in the Gospels. Politics are evil, and since Christians are to avoid both evil and the appearance of evil, Christians should avoid politics. That is a standard argument. And then there's the majority position. I truly believe this, and this position is just one of exhausted indifference. This one's way more common. This is really the root of millions of Christians' perspective. I mean, even at church last Sunday, I heard a woman, the pastor was preaching on Proverbs, on the things God hates. And the pastor said to the congregation, "Hey, shout out some answers. What do you hate?" And this woman hollered back from the back row, "Politics." Most Christians who haven't bothered to think through things in a didactic, pro and con, biblical manner, they just take this perspective of indifference. Meh, all politicians are the same. They're all in it for the power and money, so just who cares? An exhausted indifference. Now, there are likely other ways to frame the no, Christians shouldn't be involved in politics position, but those are the big catch-alls. What about the yeses? Those who believe Christians should be attentive to and even engaged in politics, how do they argue it? Well, the first one goes like this. Jesus is Lord. He's Lord over creation, the spiritual realm, angels, demons, archangels, the earth, so biology and history. He's Lord over humankind. As Lord, he rules even over politics. Therefore, since everything falls under the purview and lordship of Christ, everything in life is a matter for his dominion. Again, even politics. Who Jesus was and is should be taken into how Christians and the church engage politics. Jesus' identity should help us assess and prioritize politics. And frankly, just so you know, this perspective is taken by believers on both the right and the Christian left. It's just not at all true that Christians on the left want resolutely to stay out of politics. Oh, man, my time in seminary proved this one to be true in spades. I had professors who were adamant that Christians should indeed be engaged in the political realm and politics proper as devout leftists, because of whom they believed Jesus was. My point is, well, again, this Jesus-driven angle, this Jesus is Lord perspective, is at work for believers on both the theologically, politically, culturally right and the theologically and politically and culturally left. What else? How else is a yes answer framed for Christians this way? The second one involves salt and light, and this is a common frame. And the argument goes that Christians are called by Jesus himself, in the Sermon on the Mount especially, to be salt and light in a world permeated by sin. Or, goodness, as the notion hit me this week, Christians are called to be salt and light in a world permeated by sugar and darkness.
Wait, what?
Well, the dominant culture right now is permeated by sugar. Fake kindness, saccharine sweet compassion, brown sugar, no protein empathy, but it's a pseudo diet. Processing reality like that is like eating cotton candy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It doesn't change anything to the good. It doesn't nourish anyone for the long haul. By way of contrast, salt is meant to permeate and judge and season and flavor and preserve and enhance and influence. Jesus cares, says the salt and light line of reasoning, that we be present even in the political realm, that we salt and lighten the political realm. What else? Well, there's a third way. It's a newer way, but it is a prevalent argument, and it has to do with spiritual giftings. This is a more charismatic, a more Pentecostal angle. These folks, myself among them, these folks reason that God's Spirit gives different gifts. What's a gift? An enablement, a personality wiring, opportunity, inspiration, proclivities. It can even involve divine power. God gives different gifts to different people. The Spirit gives gifts, both for the mission of Christ's kingdom and the purpose in life of those specific folks themselves, so they can, on behalf of Christ's kingdom, engage politics and make an enormous difference. Now, I'm not much going to press you today, my listener, on which of those positions to take, but often in life, not so much for those of us alive here in 2025 in the United States. I mean, we have it unusually good, or we had it unusually good, because I believe that bubble is bursting. But often in life, across human history, for most people, frankly, for most people who have ever lived, politics is so overwhelming that it inserts itself, whether we like it or not, into our lives. Politics is that powerful, prevalent, permeating. And it would be the easy road to just disengage. It would be wonderful if politics didn't matter, right? I mean, that might be one of the beautiful elements of the coming day when Jesus Christ is King on earth and we're all existing in a resurrected state. No more war, no power grabs, no nastiness. We call it the eschaton. But here, this side of eternity, well, it's like what my father-in-law, a political scientist, Dennis, he once wrote it in a book, quote, "Wherever two or three are gathered together, there you will have politics." It's a clever play on Jesus' own words, right? Wherever two or three are gathered together, there you will have politics. Why? Because people have to live adjacent one another. People have to sort out how local and societal problems are going to be dealt with. People have to choose how bad guys and bad actors are going to be dealt with. People living with and near each other have to sort out problems. So frankly, it's impossible to conceive of life apart from politics. It's inevitable. We have to engage it. And if we don't, it can become so loud and overbearing that it becomes impossible to ignore. I mean, we lived through it recently. It can get so out of whack, so out of balance, that it overwhelms our lives. It can invade our families, our children's education, our bank accounts, our farming, food production, our child rearing, our souls, so that it wrecks and ruins and devastates and crushes millions of souls. And so responsible engagement becomes necessary. Called a necessary evil, if you will. Me, I happen to believe all government is a necessary evil. And all politics, too? Well, perhaps. Not necessarily so. But still more, you guys, we here in the United States of America live in a republic. So unlike 99.9% of the people who've ever lived across human history, we get to not only have some say, we get to have bearing. Have bearing? Yeah, let me explain. I disagree with those who believe in a republic who say our one means of influence is our vote. Right? I keep saying republic because we don't live in a raw democracy, right? I disagree with those who say that our one means of influence is our vote. Now, it's true, voting is important, but probably, I would say, voting is only 50% of our gravitas. Voting is only 50% of our influence, or what I'm calling our bearing. The way God created us, wired us, we influence and affect one another. And that happens indirectly and directly, subtly and openly, and all of that influence and pressure and presence I'm calling bearing. How we talk in our daily life, it actually has political implications. How we structure our own values, that has political implications. People pick up on that. What we prioritize in our lives, that has political implications. How we raise our kids, or now, for me, our grandkids, that has eventual political implications. How we work through problems at work, probably, indirectly, that has political ramification and bearing. So how we live our lives, it all has a cumulative effect on the power exercised in society. And the exercise of power, that's called politics. What I'm saying today is that our very lives have a political bearing. And no, I'm not reducing all of life to politics. Goodness, I'm a theologian. With all my heart, I believe all of life is finally about theology. All of life is finally about our posture vis-a-vis God, our life's orientation vis-a-vis God, our actions and intentions in light of the revelation of God. So no, theology, not politics, gets final emphasis, final priority. But this side of eternity, because politics are so powerful, we should care about what our bearing in life is. We should care about how justice is handled, or not. Russiagate, overwhelming the little pea squirt gun that was Watergate. We should care about how the small state, capital large S state spends our money. It's not their money, it's our money. We should care about whether the state does things to make things worse, not better. Homelessness, pedagogy, the education of children, race baiting. Oh, I could go on the way the state makes things worse, not better. But I want to wrap up today by asking this, my listener. What is your bearing? And yes, when I ask that, I certainly mean, what is your theological bearing? How does your belief in and relation to the risen Christ influence others? How does your theological bearing help you navigate life? Yes, I mean that, of course. But here today on a show for thinking Christians, what is your political bearing? Do you care that governmental officials who do wicked, who use their governmental power to wield wickedness against the nation in furtive fashion, get prosecuted? Do you care? Do you talk with your friends and family and kids and co-workers, all when it's appropriate about life? Do you talk to them about God? Will you talk with them about meaning and relationship and significance and priorities and gulp politics? We have a call, we have a mission, and that goes to our bearing in life. Oh, come quickly, King Jesus. We yearn for the day when, as Isaiah prophesied, the government will be upon your shoulders. With the Apostle Paul we cry, "Come quickly." Creation groans and waits for the redemption of the sons of men. But until then, help us to be faithful and true to you. Thank you so much, my listener, for joining me. Thank you for your support on Patreon. Thanks for your consideration of a support on Patreon. Until next week, God bless you. Everyone go and turn on your beautiful God-given brains.